Welcome to Education Fast Forward 11, EFF11 as we call it. Today we're working with UNESCO to have a debate around mobile learning. And the title for today's debate is Mobile Learning, Is It Ready for the Masses? Today the debate is being run from 13 different countries, from Australia to the United States, from Chile to Hong Kong. Last time we had 795 people tweeting during the debate, and we reached considerably more than that number of people reading tweets. Today we hope we can get the debate around mlearning to similarly large numbers. Here's a picture of where all the locations are of people directly taking part in the debate, and you can see the differences in time zones, as well as we said last time, the differences in temperatures. And in this room here, we are in just outside London. It's certainly considerably warmer than I think it needs to be. I'm going to hand over to Gavin Dykes, who's our EFF debate chair. He'll explain a little bit more about the debate and introduce our two guest speakers who will kick the debate off today. Gavin.
Thanks, Jim. And good afternoon, everybody, or good morning or good evening, depending on where you're coming to the debate from. It's my delight to welcome you to this Education Fast Forward 11, our 11th debate. Participants will be joining via telepresence, WebEx, Skype, and through listening to the video stream. But it's essentially, it's not about simply listening, it's about taking part. So we're very keen that you, wherever you are, however you are joining, you tweet your comments, tweet your questions. Those questions will be being picked up by, we have a couple of people working on that particularly, and handing those questions through so that we can raise them with the speakers and with all the people on telepresence. So when you make your tweets, do please use the hashtag EFF11. Our debate today is organised in partnership with UNESCO, and details, there's going to be a further discussion which goes on after this session and goes on for a couple of weeks after. So continuing to build that discussion around mobile learning.
We'll give details of that at the end.
Details of that will be given at the end of the session. Subject of our debate is mobile learning for the masses, as Jim has said, and what are realistic expectations and success criteria. I'm delighted to say we have two great people to open the discussion. Our first is Professor Miguel Nussbaum. Miguel is Professor at the Computer Science Department of the School of Engineering of Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. So he's coming to us from Santiago. In 2011, Miguel was honoured with the Chilean Award for Innovation in Education. And Miguel is going to talk to us about why sometimes technology projects fail. I hope what we'll gain from it is how to prevent them failing. But I hand over to you, Miguel, now to start your presentation. Miguel.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Good day for everybody. Let me start saying what I'm going to talk. The first couple of minutes, I'm going to tell you what I've done the last 20 years and then what we have learned. I started in 1995 in instructional design for transforming the classroom experience, and we used the Game Boy of Nintendo for bringing educational games inside the classroom. In 2001, we saw the potential of pocket PCs with Wi-Fi networks. Can you hear me? Okay. Sorry.
You are absolutely clear. Yeah, you're absolutely clear, Miguel. You just keep going.
Sorry.
No problem.
So I was saying that in 2001, we used the pocket PCs with Wi-Fi networks to bring collaboration inside the classroom. The key aspect here was that technology was the support for the social network, as you see in the photograph, so that the kids really construct knowledge, and technology was the support for the social construction of knowledge. Afterwards, we saw the potential of mobile phones and began working with them in such a way that kids also could construct collaboratively knowledge. Then we moved to netbooks when they become available, and saw that netbooks had the problem of hindering really a transparent relationship between the kids. As you see in the photograph, there was like a wall between the kids, and there was a way of not transparent the flow of information. Afterwards came the tablets, and this was really the perfect platform for doing collaboration inside the classroom. In 2007, I got contact with Kentaro Toyama of Microsoft Research Bangalore, and I saw a great opportunity in the multiple mouse where you could connect more than one mouse per computer. This was extremely interesting for poor countries since you just need one machine to bring collaboration inside the classroom. Experimentally, we learned that sharing one screen was extremely good, especially for small children. Then we moved forward and moved up to 50 kids in one machine sharing one screen, which we named Massive Multiple Mouse. So after 20 years bringing different type of technology in the classroom, we have learned a lot. And what we have learned, I want to divide it in different topics. The first one is we have to understand the way we teach. We have to see that there are two different ages, the curricular age and the educational age. And what we wanted to understand is what's the relationship of where the kids are sitting in the classroom and what they really know. So we studied the National Test of Mathematics of Chile, which comprehends 200,000 kids approximately. And we studied the questions. This test of 8th grade has questions of 8th, 7th, 6th, and 5th grade. And we used the standards defined for the ministry to understand how many kids really achieved the adequate level of learning. And what we saw was that 23% of the kids only really knew the knowledge of 7th and 8th grade, and that 67% of the kids didn't know anything about the knowledge which should have been taught in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. To understand the problem, we looked to the same kids which gave the test in 2011 to the test they gave in 4th grade. There's a national test in 4th grade and 8th grade. So we looked to the test of 4th grade. So looking to the test of 4th grade, what we looked is if the kids that achieved at 4th grade or didn't achieve at 4th grade, what happened to them at 8th grade. So 25% of the kids that achieved at 4th grade achieved at 8th grade. The kids that couldn't make it at 4th grade but made it at 8th grade were only 4%. 21% of the kids failed when they did okay. Oops, something happened to my screen. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, we can still see it, Miguel. It's
I don't see it. That's the problem. Okay, but if you see it, that's fine.
We're fine.
Because my feedback is not working, but if you see it, it's fine. And finally, what's terrible is that 50% of the kids failed in 4th grade and failed in 8th grade. So basically what happens here is that the system really cannot follow the needs of the kids. The system teaches for the curriculum, but the teacher doesn't teach for the kids. There is a huge problem with the cultural capital, and the kids cannot follow really the needs of the system at the beginning. And when they begin to understand the cultural capital of the system, what happens afterwards is that the curriculum goes too fast for them and they cannot follow them. So we teach for the curriculum and we don't teach for the kids. The second aspect, which is interesting, is how do we use technology? There's a very interesting report of Nesta of 2012, Decoding Learning, which says that in the UK there was £1 billion invested, and they say there's been little evidence of substantial success in improving educational outcomes. Something's going wrong. So we wanted to understand if this wrong is also happening in Chile. The government made a census of all the schools of Chile which has received technology. Since 1992, the government of Chile has made a huge investment in technology, and up to date we have around 6 kids for computer, which is quite okay. There's been a huge investment in infrastructure and in software. So what the government did was a study in 2010 or 2011, 2011, studying 2011, to see first how much the schools really have used this technology. Second, how they have organized this technology. And third, how they really use curricularly this technology. We made a linear regression model, which you can see in the screen. And what we saw from this model, which was studied for high schools of all the schools of Santiago de Chile, and what we saw here is about 600 schools, and what we saw was that there's a high correlation between, and a significant one, between the learning outcome and the amount of infrastructure that the school have. And this tells about the management of the schools. If the school really cares and they get really good infrastructure, learning is okay or improved.
Miguel, I apologize for interrupting. It seems to me that your screen has frozen. So I wonder if you could remove the lead from your computer and then put it back in again and see if that would...
Okay, yeah, because I lost my feedback. I also lost my feedback.
Yeah. With apologies to everybody on the call.
No, I cannot see my... there it is. Yeah.
That's it.
There we go. That's good.
Okay.
That always works.
Thanks.
Turn it off and turn it back on again. That's the best lesson.
So
excellent.
Here's the study of the census of technology and the relationship with the national test of mathematics, where you can see there's a correlation between the quantity of technology available in schools. This is all self-reported because it's a census by the schools. And what we can see, which is very interesting, that the information they give us about the curricular relation of the usage of this technology has a negative effect, which is not significant, but has a negative effect. It's neutral because it's not significant, but the tendency is negative. So what we wanted to see is we visited 37 schools and asked them how much they use the different resources. After understanding this problem, which I show you now again, is, hey, they have a lot of infrastructure. If they have a lot of infrastructure, the improvement in learning is achieved. However, what they do makes a negative relationship. So how much do they use this? And what we saw was that you have in math and in language here in the screen is that they almost don't use the technology they have available. This is reported by the students, and the previous one was reported by the schools. But you see that the device they use most, the informed they use most, is the mobile, which is very interesting because the government don't supply mobiles, the government supplies PCs and tablets and software. So we cannot then be surprised that economists wrote 2 years ago, error message, a disappointing return from investment in computing, because we are pumping a lot of money in technology, but we cannot really get an achievement in learning. A point we have really to address is about teacher appropriation. And what you see here is the learning curve of technology. To make it simple, think the last time you changed your phone. The first couple of hours, it was terrible, and you thought of throwing your phone away until you reach critical point 1. When you reach critical point 1, things began to get better, and you say, okay, it's not so worse. But if you don't have enough patience, it might be that you throw away your phone and say, this is not worth maintaining. And afterwards, things get better, but not as they were before with your previous phone. That means critical point 2. So things get better and better, but if you see there's no light at the end of the tunnel and that your productivity is not what it was before, perhaps you will throw away definitely your new phone. With teachers, happens exactly the same with the appropriation of technology. At the beginning, we give them teacher training and we teach them all just at the beginning, but we don't coach them until they reach critical point 1 and critical point 2. So how can we expect that the teachers really will maintain the usage of technology if there's no coaching, no help, before they really reach critical point 1 and critical point 2? So the question comes then, how can we really integrate technology so that teachers can make a good usage of it on one side, and on the other, the kids really learn? And we have developed two projects with 10 schools in Uruguay and in Colombia, where we show that orchestration is a very good answer. What we did first is that the topics and the curriculum has to be covered with contextualized PowerPoint presentation so that it makes sense for the kids. Second, there has to be an integration of conventional and digital resources. Kids are used to conventional resources, teachers are used to conventional resources. We cannot forget the immediate past, so we have to integrate them. Second, kids have a small focus of attention. We have seen this experimentally, so you need short and varied tasks. So you have to have the most possible quantity of different activities so that the kids really stay in focus. Fourth, that the kids have to learn at their own pace. I showed you that if the curriculum drives the system, the kids will get behind and they won't learn anything. And last, we have to acknowledge there's a huge gap between the curriculum and what the kids really know, and we have to do activities for bridging this gap. So orchestration is really one alternative for this, and I invite you to look to the January issue of Computers and Education, where there was a set of papers dedicated to it. There are different views on how to tackle this problem. So to finish, I would like to say that it's not about technology, definitely not. It's about paper, pencil, and orchestrated mobile technology. Thank you very much.
Miguel, thank you. And thank you for that starting point. And that's, I think you answered my question in that sense, which was about what we need to do to make it better. But I think those points of teaching for the system rather from the kids, the evidence of the impact of technology, and a number of the other issues that you've talked about would be true for many of us. With that, I'd like to turn to David Atchoarena, who's in Paris, and introducing David. David's role is Director of Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO. His division covers, among many areas, ICT and education, and it also hosts a dedicated program on mobile learning. And David is going to talk to us about the developments that he sees and the benefits that can come from mobile learning through his work at UNESCO. David.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good morning to all. To start with, I'd like to stress one point, which is a very, I think, essential in the way we approach ICT in general, but more particularly also mobile learning, is that the fact that technology in itself is a means, it's not an end. We've seen, and we still see in a number of countries, technology being introduced as the end, I would say, goal of some policy changes in education. Technology must be seen as a way to solve specific issues, specific challenges in education. And in my presentation, I would like to focus more specifically on the education for all goals. To what extent mobile learning can contribute in particular to target the unachieved goals, and to what extent also it can contribute to meet the targets which are in the process of being defined for 2015 and beyond. Just let me first, look at where we stand today. 2014, almost at the end of the Dakar framework. Of course, progress have been quite significant throughout the world in terms of enrollment, but there are still some significant challenges to be tackled, in particular in relation to quality, but also to quantity. For instance, there are 3 million more students today out of primary schools than they were in 1999. Let me zoom on some of the critical areas where improvements are needed. I will first start with literacy. In fact, last week we celebrated on the 8th of September the International Literacy Day. Literacy continues to be a very critical challenge in many parts of the world. There are still about 774 million adults which are still not literate, about 17% of the total population of the world. So this is continues to be a major challenge, and I'd like to outline very quickly some of the barriers which are related, which explain this situation. First of all, the lack of mother tongue content. This is still a major challenge in most parts of the world. The lack of relevance, again, one of the lessons of several decades of work in the field of literacy is the fact that content and approaches need to be relevant. The need to have also continued access to content, to written material. The need to adjust provision to the constraints of adults, and in particular, working adults. The fact that post-literacy programs are also essential to ensure retention of competences and skills after literacy programs. And finally, the issue of geographic isolation of some of the most, I would say, hard-to-reach target groups. So to what extent mobile learning can actually, help us to achieve those goals? First of all, the issue of local language, is something that mobile learning can actually address. In some of the work that UNESCO did recently, looking at how mobile phones in particular can contribute to enhance literacy skills, it was found that national experts are able to create very relevant content in local languages that can provide access to relevant text to different kinds of adult learners. The issue also of networking is essential to ensure not only participation but retention of skills. Again, mobile social media proved to be a very powerful tool to sustain that kind of networking and therefore contribute to sustained learning. Mobility and ubiquity of mobile devices is, of course, quite essential, in particular to link learning with work. And finally, the portable nature of mobile devices is also a very critical element. UNESCO has published a number of publications in explaining and illustrating some of those achievements. I will just refer to three of them: the policy guidelines that were published last year, the series on mobile learning. Here is one issue on Africa and Middle East that provides illustration on the progress in different parts of the world. And more recently, a publication that gives the outcome of a survey that was conducted together with World Reader, and that provides very interesting insights on how people do use mobile phones for reading. There are still a number, however, of pending questions, and in particular, to what extent mobile learning can be used on a large scale to actually address literacy. I'd like now to turn to a second very critical challenge for education for all, and this is gender equality, and it's likely to remain one of the key dimensions of the post-2015 targets. Just a few figures to maybe illustrate the magnitude of the gender gap. Again, out of the 774 million illiterate adults, 64% are female. Similarly, 61% of the 15-24 years old illiterate are also women. There is therefore a critical challenge here, and this includes and requires a multi-dimensional approach. Again, I'd like to refer to some programs that UNESCO has been conducting. We've been able, in a program in Pakistan, to demonstrate, in fact, how mobile learning can contribute to sustain the gains, the literacy gains after, the classes through a post-literacy program. Equitable access to mobile technologies, however, remains a challenge. We've seen that there is still a wide gap in terms of the ownership of devices between men and women, in particular in developing countries. The availability of gender-sensitive content and pedagogy is also critical. I mean, we know this from traditional forms of teaching, but it is also the case through mobile learning. Remote access is also, an element that can contribute to, in fact, sustaining literacy for women and girls in contexts where their physical mobility is limited, in particular through cultural barriers. Finally, I'd like to stress another dimension, which is to link learning with empowerment. So, in other words, the issue is not only to increase literacy, but it's also to facilitate access to employment and to eventually contribute to empowerment of girls and women. And this is something that needs to be also documented. How can mobile technologies actually contribute to reaching such empowerment? I would just like to signal that UNESCO is continuing its work in this particular field. Our Mobile Learning Week next year will in fact be dedicated to gender equality, and we're about to publish a new product on the development of literacy for women and girls through mobile phones. I'd like now to move to the third really key challenge, which has already been noted by the previous speaker. It's about teacher appropriation. Again, if we look at the overall situation of educational development, in particular in relation to the EFA targets, I mean, the teachers' gap is still quite significant. Available data show that in 112 countries, the teacher shortage reaches 2 million, in particular in sub-Saharan Africa, where this gap is quite acute. So how to actually use technology to help to bridge that gap, but also how to use technology to support and improve teachers' effectiveness. And surely mobile technologies can be part of the answer. And we've, again, experimented and documented such relationship in different programs that UNESCO conducted recently in Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, Senegal, in partnership with Nokia. I'd like to outline some of the findings of this work. Improve teachers' content knowledge through ubiquitous access to high-quality content is one really of the potential of mobile technology. Enhancing teachers' pedagogical skills is also something that has been documented. Reinforcing a teacher's community of practice. Again, the point is not only about training, it's also about coaching, it's also about networking and peer-to-peer learning and support. Increase the frequency of ICT usage. Again, I'd like to refer to the Chile cases, which actually documented the fact that the utilization rate was higher for mobile technology than for the more traditional computer approaches. Finally, it is also important to note that the use of mobile learning can actually facilitate the development of what I would call a lifelong learning system where teachers can have a continuous access to materials and to through communications to other peers. One question remains in this context. I mean, to what extent a so-called one tablet per teacher policy or approach would be more effective than the one laptop per child policy? So this is something that maybe can be discussed later on. Finally, I'd like to outline the third dimension of this relationship between mobile learning and the educational challenge, which is about education transformation. Again, mobile learning transforms the delivery mode, but also the process and the outcomes of learning. There are a number of dimensions and illustrations of this relationship through the so-called school in the cloud, small schools, one-to-one classrooms, personalized online open courses, and finally open textbooks. So countries like South Korea, Singapore, Finland, Rwanda, Turkey, Uruguay have indeed documented such relationships through the large-scale innovations that we have introduced in their system. At the end of the day, the challenge is really to see how mobile technology can contribute not only to increase educational development, but also to provide support to a new type of teaching and learning approach. And this is also one of the important dimensions that need to be taken into account within the framework of the post-2015 education agenda. UNESCO has been and is still active in contributing with member states to shape what will be eventually this agenda. And no doubt that technology, and including mobile technology, will be a part of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you both Miguel and David for that great introduction. There are so many things that one could pick out on within all of that, and I like very much, David, your challenge to us all. I think the question about one tablet per teacher being better than one laptop per child, or whether we're moving further along in those directions. But really, I welcome comments on all of these things from everyone on the call. But perhaps first we might go to David Coulthart in Johannesburg. And David, I wonder what your reflections are and what particular points you've picked out from what has been said already. And if you could relate that to the situation in Zimbabwe, I'd be very interested to hear. And also to hear if the students who are with you have a comment as well.
Thank you, and good day to everyone. I'm accompanied by Terence to my right and Estelle to my left. They are students from Petra High School in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. But Gavin, to address the points that you raised, this issue of whether to go for one tablet or one laptop per pupil or one tablet or laptop per teacher was something that really focused my attention during my 4 years as minister. And I think Zimbabwe is a very good example of the challenges faced, certainly in the third world. Because although these school students either side of me go to an urban school with access to the internet and reasonable access to tablets and IT generally, that's not the case for 70% of Zimbabwean school children. Most of the schools are in the rural areas. There is hardly any electricity. There's virtually no internet at all. And so one faces major challenges. We have the additional challenge, a historical challenge, that teachers are generally very poor. They're on pathetic salaries. Certainly in first world terms, they do not have access to purchase computers themselves. And so they have very limited ICT skills. So bearing that in mind, we felt that the best way forward was to go for the one tablet per teacher. And to develop, I can't advertise, and I worked very closely with a major computer manufacturing firm to develop something called School in a Box, which was a robust tablet with a solar panel and a very sophisticated projector. Tied to that was the development of educational applications, which would be loaded onto the tablet. Teachers would then be trained in its use, and they could take these tablets out to the most remote rural school and use them as teacher aids. Now, during my term, we only got to the pilot stages of that, but this particular computer company has developed that, and now we have School in a Box, and we're very excited by that. But we see it as a very important first step. It is simply far too ambitious in the Zimbabwean context, and I should think in most third world countries, to even contemplate trying to get one mobile or one tablet, certainly per child. We really have to focus on teachers, focus on the training of teachers, and importantly, bearing in mind what both of your speakers have said, the development of appropriate content in the mother tongue, content which is appropriate to the conditions of that country, and only then can we start this long journey to fully utilize mobile technology in education in Zimbabwe. Perhaps I could draw in Terence and Estelle if they've got any particular comments that they'd like to make from their own experience.
Yes, but on maybe straying to a different topic, different section that I found quite interesting. The UNESCO researchers discovered that they decided that by next year, 2015, they're wishing to launch a mobile learning week for awareness. And from my own research preparing for this debate, I spoke to a couple of my friends, asking them about their thoughts about mlearning and what they think is the necessity of it in Africa and how it can be used. And I was actually quite surprised to find that of maybe about the 20 friends that I asked, maybe 7 of them had no idea what mlearning is. And I figured that 1 week surely is not enough to create the awareness needed to have children actually knowing what mlearning is. And I'm sure if we had children and students alike, if we had all of them keen on mlearning and knowing what it is, surely that would actually encourage all the corporations and more people to decide to go into mlearning because there's more people lobbying for mlearning.
That's a great point, Terence.
Yes, I also, as soon as I heard the kind of the one tablet per teacher versus the one computer per child, I think really the more realistic option is the one tablet per teacher. But like Mr. Coulthard was saying, the teachers don't have the funds to get that, and I would wonder if the schools had those funds themselves, and I think that would be a problem that would have to be addressed.
Thank you for that. All good points and all helpful. Now, I feel I should go back to David Coulthard, because not to David Coulthard, I beg your pardon, David Atchoarena. You've just spoken, David. But to David Atchoarena, just to talk a little bit about Mobile Learning Weeks and their background and how long they've been going. Just to answer in a small way Terence's points.
Yeah, very quickly. UNESCO took the initiative 3 years ago to launch a so-called Mobile Learning Week, which is organized every year at UNESCO in Paris in February. And it's an event which is meant to actually review the progress made at the international level, both in terms of policy, but also in terms of education research. So it's also a platform of exchange between policymakers, between researchers, and also with industry. It has been quite, I think, effective in playing that role, and we can see that there has been increasing interest. So every year there is a particular theme. In fact, this year it was dedicated to teachers. So some of the issues that we've just mentioned were discussed at length during this year's event, and it was decided to actually focus next year discussion on the use of mobile technology to contribute to gender equality. And next year it will be co-organized, in fact, together with UN Women.
Thank you, David. I think that's great. And I think one other, which probably might come back to your opinion, and indeed the opinion of others, is we've had a comment from Sugata Mitra, who I think is listening in from Scotland, still part of this country.
Still part of the UK.
And Sugata has said, would it be right to say that any place that does not have internet over a mobile network today will sooner or later have one sooner rather than later? So that how quickly are these things changing and how quickly are things moving? With that, actually, perhaps I should turn to my right and to Tim Unwin, who might have a view on such things.
Thanks, Gavin. Sugata is absolutely right. There will be connectivity, but it'll probably be different hours of connectivity, different bandwidth, so there will always be that inequality. But the point I'd like to make is I'm absolutely amazed so far that we haven't really heard what the real drivers in mlearning are. It isn't education lists. It's the private sector, it's the operators, the hardware manufacturers, the app developers. They're the ones who are really behind this, so that they can increase traffic and usage of the pipe. The reality, I like David's comments earlier, and it really fits in very much with Miguel's arguments as to why technology doesn't actually improve education, because that's not what it's about. And I see so many ministers who have been persuaded by the coalition of private sector interests to roll out technology, be it, and they're very proud. I'm going to give a tablet to every grade X student in my country. And that's somehow going to transform education. And those ministers then frequently come in and say, now what do we do with it? So I think we need much, much more integration between the interests of the private sector and education lists if we're going to see a difference. That's why Miguel's commenting that the technology isn't having the impact that it could have. And on David's point, we need to have very, very much the learning objectives that are for. It's amazing that the role of the private sector just hasn't been mentioned so far.
I think we will come back to that, but I also want to pick up, I think Miguel and David were talking about something really important. Miguel was talking about short-term tasks being important, and David was talking about something which I hadn't really thought about before, David, about retention, about short-term literacy courses just not working, but the actual ubiquitous access to something that's mobile, having the promise of keeping that learning going so that work in that short-term course isn't lost. So what I think we haven't got to yet is, what is mlearning? Can we just put our sunny hats on and pretend that everybody is connected and then see where these benefits might be? Because then the industry might get driven to actually connect people when they see that the benefits really can be there. There's this tension of the lack of knowledge about impact, as Miguel started, and David saying, but we know that impact can come if we do certain things, is what we need to turn both governments and the industry on to providing what's needed, I think.
Thank you, Jim. I'd kind of like to dig into the perhaps the industry side of this a little bit, and if it's fair to ask Kirsten Panton in Copenhagen to comment, if you got anything to come back on, and just what's the motivations and drivers and the elements you find in your work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gavin. Well, I very much agree that it's important that we don't just get devices into the hands, mobile devices into the hands of students without preparing the ground, so to speak. And I think apart from the importance of telecoms and hardware producing, making the devices available and the mobility available, putting on the sunshine hat, as Jim says, we need publishers, we need teacher training, and we need access and not at least assessment to be in place, because this is a new world of teaching and a new world of learning. And this is the way we can enhance the learning for the single student. This is how teachers can put content into the hand of the single student at the level the student is. But that means we need to have the different things in place. We need to make sure the teachers are trained for it. And more than anything, we need to make sure there's content in place which is beyond the PDF, which we often see. So definitely, we as an industry have a huge responsibility. In Microsoft, we work a lot with governments on trying to make sure that the deployment is ready at the stage where it should be ready, meaning the grounds need to be prepared, the infrastructure needs to be in place, the training of the teachers need to be in place, etc.
It's interesting to me that in our last debate we talked with Anders Schleicher talking about the Teaching and Learning International Survey, and a great emphasis was put on the importance of collaboration. It seems to me that collaboration is coming out loud and strong here again. I wonder if we could turn to Adrian Godfrey, who might be able to add to that view of things.
Thanks, Gavin. Obviously, from a GSMA point of view, the operators have a certain amount of capacity and ability that aligns, we feel, beautifully with the education process. If you look at formal learning, non-formal and informal, there are absolutely multiple offerings. But the issue is the operators are used to delivering voice services and more recently data. And they're used to delivering those with exceptional business models, as Tim mentioned, to a very high quality because they own the whole of the ecosystem. I think my frustration exists that these capacities are not understood by education, and education is not understood by the GSM operators. I think that's fair to say. So the result is you're looking at a very complex ecosystem to deliver education, especially in a formal environment. You're looking for policy that supports the change. You're looking for retraining. You're looking for fantastic content. You're looking for additional products and services such as assessment, such as collaboration, such as online tutoring. And to pull that together needs a couple of things. One, it needs somebody to really pull a business model together. And two, it needs leadership. And I guess I'm really frustrated by the fact that some of the traditional players in this space, such as the publishers, are not stepping up, realizing there's a change in the air and providing that leadership.
Adrian, thanks for that. Could you just give us 1 minute on GSMA and who GSMA are?
Oh, sorry.
May not be familiar to everybody.
We said there's no advertising. No advertising. But GSMA is the industry association for over 800 of the world's mobile network operators. And associate members include Microsoft, Intel, and others interested in all aspects of delivering services over mobile networks.
Thank you. Very nicely done, Adrian. We were just looking for context.
It's 30 seconds. That's very good.
That's brilliant. All good stuff. Can we go to Eliane in Lebanon, please?
Sure.
For your view of things.
What we're doing here is we're combining the best of both worlds. We're linking the one tablet computer into one teacher computer with linked to a TV, connected to the internet, which can download material and use it offline, linking it to 10 Raspberry Pis computers so that students will be connected offline doing their exercises and synchronizing when at the end of the day through a dongle. And we are linking it with the concept of kids gaining basic skills and learning to code and using their coding to learn thematic applications that are applied on UNICEF skills. So what we're doing here is we're supporting this with coaches, supporting teachers. We're providing training to teachers. And the pilot is happening now, currently. And we're in the process of evaluating what we're doing with the College of Teachers. And we hope that it will be a successful model to attend to providing resources, basic skills in non-formal education to the underserved. So we're trying it in refugee camps currently. And we will keep you updated with the results.
We'd be very pleased to hear the results, but I think that sounds like a very innovative and exciting prospect. And I think that working across so that you're getting the scaling happening at that local level seems to me a great idea.
What we found, Kevin, what we found is the lack of resources. Everything that you said was very has led us to develop this program. There's a lack of resources. There's a lack of teacher training. There's a lack of where to start when you don't have anything in your local language, and the situation. So when the community really says that's what we need, then there is a possibility to think with the community of what works for them. And that's what we have. The field partners are very eager to make it happen. And UNICEF has been an amazing partner to make it happen.
I'm really pleased by that, because I think what you're doing is actually responding in many ways to some of the things that were said in the presentations at the beginning. And what you're doing is addressing some of those issues. So I really am interested and keen to hear what happens, and hope you will be very successful with that. Can we move to Bob Harrison in Manchester? Bob, you have some observations or questions?
I was interested in Miguel's opening presentation, because it contrasted and contradicted something that I opened with at the Research Ed conference last week in London, because I think asking whether investment in technology will improve learning outcomes is actually the wrong question. I think it's what we should be thinking about is what's the opportunity cost of not investing in technology and ensuring our young people and teachers have the digital skills and creativity to compete in a global economy. Having said that, I work for Toshiba, so let's get cards right on the table. There is no evidence anywhere in the world of any causal link between any piece of technology and improved learning outcomes. So let's be clear about that. What there is an abundant amount of evidence about the relationship and correlation between schools, colleges, universities, providers of learning who use technology effectively and improve learning outcomes. So let's be very clear. Technology doesn't teach anybody anything. That's what teachers do. That's what learning providers do. And I think the challenge is not about technology. It's more about culture. And, I was with Angela and other people earlier on this week. What we're talking about is trying to nudge the culture of the education service. And at the moment, I'm just going to read to you a quote from Diana Lorillard, a good friend of ours and member of the ETAG group, that what she says is that the drivers of the education system, i.e. assessment, curriculum, inspection, quality requirements, the funding, the promotion criteria, those things who are the drivers of education system have not changed in recognition of what technology can offer. So unless we address leadership, vision, connectivity, workforce skills and assessment, particularly assessment and accountability, we are never going to get the gains which Miguel and all of us want, which are not necessarily about learning outcomes linked to PISA or anything like that, but learning outcomes that will really ensure our children and older people are equipped to cope in the third millennium.
I think I think those are all good points and interesting, because I think they represent a whole lot of challenges. And I think one of the things I reflect on as we try to move education forward faster, or faster forward, whichever way it is how we navigate a path through this in such a way as that we can actually make progress, because a lot of these things get caught in the traffic of discussion rather than the taking of action. So it just kind of moving, I don't know whether it's moving goalposts or what exactly, but that kind of moving us forward together. Now, Michelle Selinger, I think in London City. Come in, Michelle. Your time is now.
Thank you. I agree with everything that Bob's just said. I think that's really true. And I think the only way you're going to get action is through that dialogue, and dialogue leading to action. And it's bringing together teachers, policymakers, providers, and industry, content providers, and academics who do this research. They need to all come together with the teachers and with kids to talk about what needs to happen in order to move this forward. And that's true. But the point I wanted to make really was around, we've been talking a lot about content and the importance of content, and that's absolutely vital. But there's also the potential for collaboration through voice, through video, through text. And mobile learning is fantastic for that. Mobile technology is fantastic for that. The opportunities for learners to work together with learners in other countries, in other parts of their city, as well as learners close by. Access to teachers when there's a shortage of teachers, and we know there's a huge shortage of teachers in many countries. And also the access to experts to bring that authenticity to learning. And because we have this mobility, it's much easier to get the access to people. So I don't want the discussion just to be about content. I want the discussion to also be about collaboration and the importance of mobile technologies for that.
Thanks, Michelle. I think these are really, all of them are interesting points. And I can't but help think that when you look at the number of mobile contracts in the world, and I know that doesn't equate to the number of people with mobile phones, but I think Ericsson said there were 6.7 billion mobile contracts, which equates to about 4.5 billion people individually with phones. What we've had is an awful lot of people learning a different set of behaviours. And it strikes me that part of the challenge of education at the moment is that balance of whether we're learning knowledge or behaviours or skills. And mobile technology seems to be doing it, not necessarily in the way we particularly want at the moment, but the way we might go in the future. But at that point, I'd like to bring in Stephen from Atlanta, who's been, I believe, working hard and watching the Twitter sphere to see what tweets are coming through. Stephen, have you any comments or particular points that come up from there?
Yeah, so the conversation has been fast and furious for the last hour, and it's been really deep, and it's taken a lot of different directions. But there's been two that I think that a lot of people have been talking about, and one, especially that Lucy Gray mentioned, was how do we get powers that be to look at other factors besides achievement when evaluating the value of mobile learning or technology. And that's an issue we face in the U.S., but it's apparent that it's not just the U.S., it's everywhere, that there's trying to be a correlation between technology and improvement of learning when we simply know that you can't make that correlation. So that's one. And then this aspect of one device per student versus one device per teacher is a very hot topic, because especially in the U.S., there's a large push to put a device in the hands of every student, but it seems that many countries are taking the opposing view and putting devices in the hands of teachers. And I just wonder, and there's a large debate about that on the hashtag. So those are just two places where people have gone this morning.
Gavin, would I be able to comment?
Jennifer, you're there. Pleased to see you. Well, half of you anyway.
Jennifer, you just off picture, so if you move in the front and start speaking, you'll be fully on.
Okay, is this better?
Yay, much better, yeah. Hi, Michael.
Great.
Hello.
I just wanted to jump in because the last 2 points really resonated with me. The comment from Bob on the challenge not being about technology, but being about culture. I strongly agree with that. And in thinking about school culture, how do you shift that culture towards a focus on inclusion, and also to focus on these ideas and values around global citizenship and student voice, and just that comment also on the potential for collaboration. We agree that it is so strong and powerful, and we've run different pilots with mobile technology for promoting intercultural education, so collaboration among students within the classroom, but also with other students around the world. We, Taking It Global, received the Intercultural Innovation Award last year from the United Nations Alliance of Civilization, and we piloted a mobile app and experience where students were given prompts of different questions about their background, their daily life, and to exchange those photos. So I felt that it was important to really look at the values behind the learning experience, the culture and the context of learning, So in order for mobile learning to really reach the masses, it is not just about the technology, but very much about the culture of collaboration, inclusion, and these values of global citizenship. And I also just wanted to commend UNESCO, because there's this really great report that was created in the past year on global citizenship education, preparing learners for the challenges of the 21st century. And we were part of this dialogue in Thailand last year that this report is based on. And I just really think that the pillar of global citizenship should be connected to mobile learning for the masses.
Thank you. Jim and I are fighting over the button. Thank you. No, that's really excellent. I think there's an awful lot of messages coming through strongly here, I think, in different ways. Jim, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I just
You're
think
writing me notes.
I was writing a note there and just thinking...
I can't read you writing.
I know what Michelle said about content, but is there a big shift here from content to collaboration? Is that what we're saying? Is the promise of mlearning leaving content behind? Maybe that's going to look after itself, and maybe it's the collaborative nature of the interactions that will drive the learning. I have noticed that Kathy Rubin's been making some really interesting tweets. So I wonder if we can go across to Kathy for the people that aren't watching the tweets, Kathy, and for you to make some of your points.
Which one? I think I sent about 10. Sorry, very good debate.
Any of them, Kathy. They're all really interesting.
Okay. Well, the first thing I just want to say is that we did the Global Search for Education, a series on tech. I know we're not plugging, but it was called Got Tech, and we asked a number of education systems around the world to tell us about, what they were doing with ICT and what their implementation plans were. And it was very helpful in that we saw some really great success stories. And I highlight Singapore in one of my texts as having a very good plan that seems to have had that element of collaboration everybody's talking about. Where they, it was actually a 3-phase plan, but, they got it very right on all counts. So without any more on that, I think it's worth looking that up. Singapore Got Tech, Global Search for Education. I promise I won't plug that again. But I think that is, we can learn from successful systems, even if there are cultural differences. There's a lot we can learn from systems that are getting it right. And the other points I'm making is, a lot of people believe that the media, tech is a media that our children, have been born into. It's almost an extension of them. I mean, when you see young kids with technology, I am just amazed at how quickly they can teach me how to use it and how stupid they feel I am that I don't get it as quickly as they do. So I just make the point, we saw so much change in technology in the last decade. We went from mainframe to desktop to netbooks to tablets to mobiles in less than 10 years. How do we stay on top of this? I mean, our kids can. Is my gut feeling. How do we stay on top of this as teachers, as educators, as adults? How do you keep the professional development up to date with a generation that, just seems to, be very, very good with this stuff?
I know where my answer would come on that, and it's probably something to do with learner voice, but I bang on about that enough, so... maybe I want
an hour before you've said that.
I know I'm a little late today, but with that, perhaps I could ask Angela to.
Thanks, Gavin. Just to respond to that point, I think we have to be a little bit careful about over-romanticising young people's interactions with technology, and I'm basing these comments on quite a lot of research, including a 3-year study that I led, where we followed young people who had powerful connected devices to use as they saw fit over a 3-year period. And yes, of course, there were children who developed meaningful facility with those technologies quite quickly, but there were an awful lot who didn't. They would appear to be very competent, and they would certainly be prepared to spend extended periods of time with the technology. But when you actually examined what they were doing, it actually was often quite trivial.
And when we looked into the kids who were the high-end adopters, inevitably they were part of family and friendship groups where they were exposed to competent users. So I think that, that the whole digital native argument, like so many arguments, is a tricky one. And we must be really careful about assuming that young people will have the necessary knowledge and skills to use devices to support their learning without being taught. Now, that takes me on to another point. And again, there's a very healthy literature around the whole subject of collaboration in learning. And again, one of the things that comes out of that is we need to learn how to collaborate effectively. The technologies can be phenomenal facilitators for collaboration, but that collaboration won't necessarily come spontaneously. And then the point that I really wanted to make is that these questions about, should we be giving this device to these people or that device to those people, that question comes a long way down the line. The first question is, what kinds of models of learning do we really want to facilitate in our education system? And it seems to me that most effective education will have some kind of balance between consumption of content and production of content. Because, you can't have an entirely skill-based curriculum, because if you're going to learn, you've got to learn about something. Now, the degree to which we all have to learn about the same thing is ultimately a political decision, but you've got to learn something. So there will be an element of exposure to content, and high-quality content is always handy. You could argue there's an awful lot of it out there. How much do we need to spend creating more? But that's kind of, that's a different argument. But there also needs to be a hefty portion of educational experience that is about creating powerful representations of your own understanding of what you're learning. And that's where the collaboration can really come in, because if you have input and feedback and you work collaboratively on those manifestations of your understanding, then you start to get into the whole formative assessment loop, often peer-to-peer assessment. Vygotsky got that slightly wrong. It doesn't always have to be a more expert other. Peer-to-peer collaboration there can be really powerful also. And it is about which of those techniques do you want to put the emphasis on? What do you want the technology to be supporting? Now, if you believe that your education model is all about exposing people to powerful content, then a teacher and a projector is a really powerful model. But if you want there to be the content production and the collaboration, then clearly that's got to be about young people, learners, having the technology in their own hands.
It's
I just want to respond. Am I allowed to just respond to something very quickly? To say that when I'm talking about young people finding it, very easy to use technology, perhaps more so than educators, I see pros and cons in that. And we actually asked, that question when we did our series. I think technology makes it much more of a two-way street. I think the teacher's role might slightly change as a result of technology. Does the teacher become more of the mentor, the coach in the situation? But at the same time, there's the whole digital citizenship aspect of technology that needs to be addressed. How to raise kids that are good digital citizens. So I just wanted to make that comment. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to romanticize it, in that respect. I see a lot of pros and cons that we need to address from both sides on this.
What I want to do is make sure we pull back to mobile learning, because in some ways it all relates, but but we want to keep on with that focus. It does make me think, by the way, some of the comments that have just been made, that comment that somebody made about if you're wanting to do well you could be using your mobile phone or learning and whatever, that you don't choose your school, you choose your family and your friends. So that getting that support, and if you get groups who are collaborating together, that's the way you can really do well. But in order to pull us back, and I know there are one or two people who are waiting to ask questions, so I hope you'll bear with me, but I'll come to you in just a moment. But if we might go to Miguel, and just for you to comment on the discussion so far, Miguel, and how you think that plays out with respect to your views of the use of mobile learning.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Yes, I took some notes and I have 3 points. The first one that worries me is that the conversation is too techy for me. We shouldn't focus on technology, we really should focus on the pedagogy. I like very much the idea of culture of learning. And when we talk about culture of learning, we have to think about of the way we teach, because what we teach, the way we teach today, as I showed you, is really focused on the system and not on the kids. We have to think on the kids, and the educational system is definitely not looking to the kids. And the second thing, also think on the kids, is what we teach. What we are teaching is really what the kids really need. Is the quality adequate for the needs of the kids? And is it also appropriate for the kids? So I like very much the idea of culture, but really we have to focus on what we teach and how we teach. That's the first thing. The second thing that I like very much, the idea of the one tablet. I really support the idea of the one tablet. And as I showed you, we are working on one computer per classroom since 2007. But what I really think is, if we're going to introduce technology, once again, we have to think on the kids. The teacher has to be empowered, definitely, because if the teacher is not empowered, the teacher won't know how to really help the kids. But we have to give the kids the tools so that they can really be the active learners in the classroom. And for achieving this with one tablet or one computer per classroom, we can really, and there's technology today for doing it, to give one input device for each of the kids. So with one computer, one projector, and one input device per kid, you can really empower the classroom and transform the classroom experience for the kids. So I support it completely, but including one input device per kid. We did it with mouse and with keyboards. And the last issue is I'm working on collaboration since 2001, and I really believe in collaboration. But what I've learned in the last more than 10 years is that we have to empower the teacher to achieve an adequate usage of the technology. If we give the teacher just the tools and the software, the teachers don't know how to really make use of it, because teachers have not been prepared in the schools of education to collaborate. And we have to understand the difference between cooperation and collaboration. What I think most of people are really thinking is about cooperating, but the really difference is when there's interdependence and peer support in a common goal between the kids, and that's collaboration. And for achieving this, we really have to train the teachers and make them understand what collaboration really is.
Thank you, Miguel, and thank you for those comments. Just, David, before you do, one quick thing. Sure. Just a call out to Susan Inman, who is listening into this and linking to lots of students. I think, Susan, I hope you are listening to this, but I would hope this, in a sense, warms or captures your interest and captures the interest of the students, because I think it's the kind of work that you'd be interested in.
I've got a direct line to Susan, so if she'd like to remember to Skype me, I can bring her questions up in the middle of the call.
Excellent. So we can do that. David Coulthard. Sorry, I interrupted you.
David Coulthard.
Yep. I think it was David who spoke.
Thank you. I just wanted to support what Miguel's just said from an African perspective once again. Aside from the fact that the teachers need to take the lead on this, in many third world countries, there are massive economic constraints on what one can do. To give you an example, my last month as Minister of Education in Zimbabwe, I was responsible for the education of over 3 million children, had 109,000 teachers under my direction, 8,000 schools, and I only had, you're not going to believe this, but this is true, I had $20,000 allocated to me for the whole month of June to run all of those schools. And that is obviously an extreme, but it does indicate the challenges that many African countries and third world countries have in implementing this. And there is a vast gulf, as we debate this, between situations which prevail in North America and Europe. And so what I want to do is to sort of complement what Miguel is saying, that aside from the necessity of having teachers drive mobile learning, there's often an economic necessity. It is simply pie in the sky for most African countries to even contemplate supplying one tablet or even one mobile phone for every, in the Zimbabwean context, 3 million children. It's an enormous challenge just for us to provide them for the 109,000 teachers. And for that reason alone, we really do need to focus on giving teachers the skills, particularly in the third world.
I think that's a great point and grounding point, and also what it does is if you get your pedagogies right, if you use the material and share it, as Eliane was mentioning in Beirut, you can find models which actually find a middle way through it, so you can use technology well to include. And I'm very pleased to see both Terence and Estelle there. I presume tweeting on their phones. I'm not sure, but it could be. But
they've got some points.
Doing a good job.
What
Estelle, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I wanted to say collaboration was brought up, and I myself, as a student, can say I haven't really collaborated much over the internet or further like that, and I think it needs to be promoted more, because I don't know if I want to, in a safe environment, talk to kids from other countries on any of the subject matter we learn, like where do I go, what do I do? Yeah.
You need a safe environment.
Yes.
Could I also just add something? What Miguel said, where you're saying there are many teachers who are untrained with mlearning, and that actually reminded me of a question that was posed earlier, which said, is internet coming sooner or later? And in situations like in Zimbabwe, I mean, I live in the second largest city in Zimbabwe, but I know internet is still something that's very scarce and not even reliable. But we have many situations whereby the teachers actually have phones, and our students also having phones, which are SMS capable. And so going back to what Bob from Manchester had said, that it's more about the content and not really the technology as such. So why can't we begin with the baby steps of saying, okay, let's have SMSs where the teacher send data, send information to their students via SMS before we start thinking about the massive internet apps, collaboration internationally and such.
Also on...
Last point. Go, carry on.
Also on what Miguel was saying about it being applicable to life, and what Terence saying about SMSs, why not have life skills points coming through SMSs? I think in Africa there's a lot of issues like AIDS, life skills, and a lot of things that could be addressed like that.
I suspect Jennifer and Michael might well be in touch with all of you there at some point, given the courses that they're starting and the collaboration that they're building. So thank you for all those comments. I'd like now to turn to John Galloway. John, I know you've been wanting to say something for a while. I hope you haven't forgotten.
I wrote it down. Thank you. I wanted to comment on around teacher skills. I mean, we've heard about empowering teachers, the kids as active learners, learner voice, and changing culture. It was interesting. I was listening to Miguel and talking about the different, a rich lesson, contextualising, integrating digital and non-digital resources, short and varied tasks. It all sounded very similar to what happened in the UK with the literacy and numeracy hours back in the late 90s, which was effectively a way of teacher training, but it was also teaching the way teachers worked in schools. Another thing we had in the UK, so I'll come to mlearning in a moment. Another thing we had in the UK was NOF training and tablets for and laptops for teachers. The idea that by putting computers in the hands of teachers, it was one of the easiest ways of teaching, giving teachers the skills to then teach. So I'm a little concerned about this debate between devices for teachers or devices for pupils. I don't think there's a very useful polarisation at all. I think it's devices for everybody. The polarisation, on the point of culture, I've recently been working on case studies on mobile learning for a book that I've been working on with Merlin John and Maureen McTaggart. Several of the schools, or all of the schools, I'd say, are schools where there's been a change in culture to technology being very embedded. But that in itself has actually been, in some senses, a barrier. Teachers who are used to working with in a very rich way with technology, when presented with mobile technology, actually found a challenge to changing the way they worked. An example was when they were making films. This is a school that actually has a film studio, including chroma key facilities. And so they're used to using high-end cameras, lots of lighting, post-production facilities and so on. When they were given mobile devices like iPads, they found it difficult to shift to quick and dirty working, just picking something up and taking a snapshot at that point, of actually shifting their culture from a very, I suppose, sophisticated use of technology to perhaps a more rough and ready, hands-on approach. I wanted to also comment on Terence's point that teachers are untrained with mlearning. I don't know, but whether we have an assumption that because you can teach with mobile and online technologies, I think is quite a dubious one. I'm a qualified teacher. I'm also a qualified rugby coach, and I'm actually qualified to teach online with online technology. I have a certificate in online education and training from the Institute of Education, which, as an educationalist, I think is quite rare. But all those three different qualifications I have, whilst there's overlap, there are also quite significant differences. And I think this is where we may move from Kirsten's beyond PDF and towards from content to collaboration, is if teachers actually shift the way of working, shift the pedagogy that the technology enables from the way we do things, but we do it a bit differently because we've got a device in our hands, to one where we actually use the affordances of the device. So that, I think, is where we'll move from the focus on content to focus on collaboration, once we appreciate what it is, just what it is, that device, the opportunities that device allows us.
Thank you very much, John. I'd say a comprehensive set of comments. And then what it strikes me as we're going through that is actually what we're challenging is the number of the presumptions of the education systems, which basically, are we right to carry on with the assessment in the same way? Are we right to carry on with the standard curriculum in the same way? The skills, content, even the relationship between teachers and learners. Maybe all of that needs to be called into question as we adopt technology more fully. Keith, I'd like to turn to Keith now. I'm sure you've been very quiet, Keith.
Unlike me. Thanks, Gavin. A great conversation, and I think I'd like to focus a little bit on the leadership piece, which I think, what is it that school leaders and governments should be doing in the area of mlearning? And from a North American perspective, at least, there's almost a breathless quality to this conversation in the United States. It's hard to pick up a newspaper or watch a media release from our school districts who aren't, in fact, talking about a one-to-one initiative, often using mobile devices, tablets, or something like that. I think from our perspective, we agree with what UNESCO, what David indicated early on, that this is about being a catalyst for a different kind of learning. I think the problem that we see with leadership is too often they are leading with the technology, not with the pedagogy. And that's a mistake. It's also a mistake, a really common mistake is that they do things, they say, some minister or some school district superintendent says, we're going to do it for everybody next, and we're going to do it in 3 months. And that is a mistake. We think that you need to, a big pitfall is not testing things out. The second part of that is the counterintuitive other side, which is you have to have a plan to scale. We see too many school districts that say, well, yeah, we're doing one-to-one because it's done at one school or one class level, but it never scales. Even our largest school effort in the state of Maine has never moved beyond kind of the middle and high school. And also just making sure that you have a plan for real implementation. That's a scalability. And finally, I think the thing that we see that leaders need to do is understand that mlearning isn't an end in itself. but it's about continuous improvement. And so, it's about innovation and thinking about what learning looks like today. So I hope that's helpful.
That's great. Keith, as always, insightful. What I'd like to do is now go back to Steve in Atlanta. Steve, any updates on or any changes in directions of the tweets and comments that are coming through?
Yeah, there's been some interesting conversation around industry and education, and the fact that, as someone mentioned, there also needs to be much more interoperability between devices. Education gets tied to manufacturer, not to benefits of learning. So someone asked, do we need to move away from consumer solutions to transform ed, or to look to developing education-specific devices? And I think that's interesting, is that a lot of districts and a lot of schools, especially in the U.S., get tied to one manufacturer, and the same and globally, they get tied to one type of device. And does that limit a student's ability to create using, everybody wants to have an iPad or everybody wants to have a Chromebook? Does that limit their ability to create if they don't have the opportunity to have multiple different types of devices?
Interesting. Change. Now,
Can I comment on that one? Can I comment on that one quickly, please?
Why don't you? You did say please, so that's all right.
I think it's really important to say that we in the industry are doing a lot to move to cloud technology, which is operating system agnostic, which means if you have an iPad, if you have an Android device or a Windows device, you can use the cloud technology anyway. And that's because it's really important that students can connect and collaborate despite the device they're using. Thank you. Had to say that.
Well done, Kristen. Thank you. Yeah, Jim, over to you.
Susan Inman at the Quaglia Institute has been talking to some students about what they think about mlearning. And I can't remember who said it earlier, but someone said before we're getting caught up talking about the device more than we're talking about what the impact is. And it's interesting that the questions from the students that they'd like answered, which we will publish on EFF11 afterwards, they're talking about things like, one, students just get bored as they get bored with everything else. So there's something, I know Angela did work on that in Bristol about how things are used. And I do remember some link between the type of education in class and the type of usage out of class was a really important link. But then they have 4 questions all around, well, how are they going to be used? Will they replace a teacher on the one hand? Will they be used for assignments where kids have got to go and learners have got to go and look things up and work together? But they get into other things which we haven't touched yet. Is it just better for the environment having mobile devices than providing books? We need learners to bring us around to what the issues are. And what they really want are some examples of success stories, because there must be some there. Interestingly, they're also interested in cheating, that students will hand in work that might just be, I can't imagine who would do that, but that might happen somewhere. So I think these questions, which we'll publish on EFF11 are worth looking at, because I think in some ways these students have been at least as insightful as people on the call, Gavin.
Of course. Probably more insightful.
I wouldn't go that far.
What I would say to that cheating question, just for what it's worth, is that I find it extraordinary that what we do as normal practice in our work is what people in schools would describe as cheating frequently.
Yes.
Because actually, if we didn't, we'd be sacked. Because
you often use my slides when you're presenting.
I always use. No, not if I can help it.
Oh, no, I don't
acknowledge that.
But I just wanted to pick up one bit before I get too flippant. That one of the tweets which I picked up was from a number of people actually talking about the culture thing is really the big thread, and the thing that's behind the culture is the shift from centralised education. I think Sean McDougall was talking about this, and distributed, and that needs trust. The shift in culture is a shift in trust, and I think that would be really interesting to see. Is mlearning the power of generating trust, or will it fail? If where's the equation on trust and mlearning and collaboration?
How do you build it? How do you make sure that it's built in? I want to go to Tim, and then I'd like to go to David Atchoarena to just for you, David, to give your comments on the way the conversation is going from your point of view.
Thanks, Gary. I'd just like to reiterate what David Coulthard said. I don't think we're remembering the reality of some of the poorest countries. I had a discussion with a leading government official in a poorer country a couple of weeks ago, and he was challenged by the fact that no teachers wanted to work in rural areas of this country. There were no teachers in schools. They couldn't recruit, and was sort of desperate, saying, can't we use technology? Can't we use mobiles actually to give the kids something so that when they could be in areas that did have connectivity, they would at least get something. And I have to say my reaction back to that was it's more important to find ways to get teachers in those areas and finding ways that they could perhaps use technology to have the things that they were getting in towns but couldn't in the country. But it really did challenge me because, yes, we're saying teachers are important, but at the same time we're saying that in situations where it is really difficult for there to be teachers, we have to find something that can support children. And that goes back to, of course, Sugata's ideas about the way that it is possible. So I think we always have to be context specific, but it's all very well for us to be talking in largely nice, in inverted commas, connected, electricity, rich areas. The reality of the people who David Atchoarena wants to reach, those who haven't been reached, is it gets very, very much more difficult to deliver that, to deliver on the last few who are illiterate, who don't have that equality of access, who are in margin areas, is really tough. And I just think we're not placing enough attention on that.
I feel like we're missing out on some input here from the people that are doing work on bringing power to places which don't have power. There's been some tweets. David Fairbairn-Day has been tweeting about companies that are really looking to miss out men's power and go from 12 volts to 12 volts. And I'm really interested as well, and I know Adrian put him on the spot maybe. When you listen to the numbers, Jim Buchan mentioned before that the number of connected devices will increase by 20-fold in the next 5 years or something. And yet Gavin says we've got as many SIM cards on the planet as we've got people. I'm really confused about all this. Maybe I've got 2 SIMs, I haven't got 10, but the industry is saying connectivity is around the corner. And David in Zimbabwe is saying, well, it's not. We're miles away from it. What is the reality? I'm confused.
There are many different realities, I'd say. So David Atchoarena, can
I interject here a little? Can I say something about the reality?
David?
Could you do it after David, Eliane? And
sure.
So I just would like to pick up David's comments and then we'll come to you, if that's okay. David.
Thank you. 4 points, maybe. First of all, connectivity. Again, I think that remains a very critical challenge. As we heard from our colleagues from Zimbabwe. It also calls for maybe new types of collaboration between telecom, between the operators and the school system. It is true that SMS-based solutions can, to some extent, be an alternative, but still to fully benefit from the potential of mobile technologies, connectivity remains the aim to reach. About collaboration, of course, new technologies and mobile technologies, cloud solutions can contribute to change the model of teaching and learning towards more collaboration. But again, at the same time, the key challenges is to reach and change the teachers and the pedagogy. Again, to what extent the school system introduces project-based learning. I mean, those are fundamental questions that needs to be addressed before even we can think about how technology can contribute to move to more collaboration-based learning. The question about learning outcomes like technology, I think this is a very important question. It is true that there is no evidence, but it is true also that for policymakers, I mean, those who actually have to invest in technology for the education system, it remains an important question. And here I think that we have probably to reflect on what we mean by learning outcomes. In other words, with the penetration of technology, not only in the school system, but also in society at large, the goals of education, the objectives of teaching and learning do change. And I think that it is in that context that we need also to see to what extent technology integration in teaching can actually contribute to reach some of those new goals, like building. We heard about connectivity, and the development of digital citizenship, for instance. What does it mean? Finally, for content, again, I'd like to return to the examples that we heard from Zimbabwe. I think for a number of countries in the world, and in particular those who are still struggling to reach EFA goals, content remains a very critical element and challenge. So mobile technology and mobile reading in particular, remain a powerful approach to actually make content available everywhere, and in particular in places where books and libraries do not exist. Thank you.
Absolutely. David, thank you. Eliane, and we'll come back to Riel shortly, I promise you. But Eliane.
Thank you. I wanted to stress on that the point that was just mentioned about the reality of things. What we've seen is that mobile learning and specifically telephones are in the hands of young people in underserved region, and that it does bring more social cohesion and breaks the divide, because by being connected, they've been able to communicate through their phone, through SMS, and they have not had necessarily formal learning. So they are learning to communicate and to write and type in order to communicate with others. And that's a huge enabler through connectivity to bring them as level in order to learn. So yes, we need teachers to provide and to have pedagogy and culture. And if the kids have the technology, it's a big piece, an enabler to be supported by the teachers.
Thanks, Eliane. I know Jim wants to ask a question from you.
Hi, Eliane. In Lebanon, where you are, obviously it isn't the most stable part of the world at the moment, and we've chatted a lot about how hard it is to do ordinary things. Is mlearning releasing potential that because people just don't feel safe that they got access to learning, just because that's the way it is? Are you seeing any impacts of that?
We are. I mean, some schools have enabled. There are some schools that are making it formal. Kids are allowed to bring their own devices, so you have to bring your own device. But I'm speaking into both spectrum. If you go in a refugee camp and you ask a child who's giving you a poem or a song, you say, "Where did you learn this?" And he picks up his device and he says, "On my phone." And it's incredible. This is amazing. And if you visit a camp, they're connected before bringing in food. And so it's important to use, like taking it global, saying, use it for a good cause. Global citizenship is essential in all circumstances for the social good.
I think it's just really interesting.
It is. It's amazing. It's incredible.
And it's not just in areas of conflict, of which there are many. And Dadaab in the north of Kenya has been there, 25 years? Somebody help me, as a refugee camp. But it wasn't long ago the Philippines, and before that in Haiti. These are areas where mlearning can actually make a difference.
It makes a difference for a number of reasons. And I just, to kind of lift up the same booklet, which David Atchoarena has now handed over to me. All the way across.
An amazing system.
It was a very, very quick system. But just the comments within this book here of about policy making and minimising educational disruption in conflict and disaster areas is seen as one of the strengths of mobile learning. It is absolutely one of the things to consider, that I think you can set things up quickly and allow people to reconnect. And that, I think, plays to the points that Miguel has talked about in terms of the specific needs and desires of the people who are learning themselves. With that, I'd like to jump across to Lucy Gray in Chicago. Lucy, your tweets have been mentioned, but you've not yet spoken.
Can I have a comment soon as well, please, if you don't mind?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm coming to you. Lucy has deferred to you, John, I think.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Lucy. No, I wasn't.
I don't want
no
arguments
connecting with you. So.
That's not like the debates I've heard in Scotland recently.
So am I going? So my apologies, Lucy. I'll make up to you.
It's okay. It's okay. I guess what I'm feeling. Do you want to go ahead, John? I'll defer to Scott.
I just wanted to pick up on a few points that have been made, and particularly one of the points from Ilian just a moment ago. I think there are, particularly when we look at the mobile networks, the world is definitely going mobile. There's no doubt about that. 4G networks are growing something like 250% per annum. South Korea is already talking about the 5G network, which will be thousands of times faster than the 4G network. They are telling us, so that our phones are constantly connected. We're going kind of mobile native. It's incredibly personal. I think there are a number of affordances that mobile learning brings to education. Three in particular are of interest to me. One is that it allows teaching and learning and virtual teaching and learning to happen anywhere, anytime. That's kind of obvious. The other one is, and it's been it's a key point for some of the issues that have been raised in this debate. It gives access to hundreds of millions of people who have not previously had access to the possibility of some form of education, teaching and learning. I think probably the most important one, though, is the fact that it gives the learner the potential to establish a very high level of control over their own learning. Now, that in a sense has always been true of connected devices. It was true of the first two connected devices that were brought onto a network. But I think that the mobile device brings it to a very personal level with each and every one of us. So when you take those three affordances together, I really think that mobile learning is about to take off in a very big way. It's already a global phenomenon. We know that. But I think, lifting the points that Tim mentioned and one or two others have mentioned earlier on, I believe it's in the developing world where the effect will be felt most profoundly, because it's in the developing world where people have a hunger for learning, where they haven't had access to that possibility so far, but the mobile networks are about to give them that, or are already giving that to them. And one final point, we mustn't always look at this in a top-down way or a teacher-led way. One of the things that last affordance I mentioned gives to people is the ability to self-direct and to self-control their own learning. And a lot of what's going to happen will be people taking control of their own learning and using the mobile networks for that purpose. No matter what countries, national governments, multinational companies and so on, whatever they do, people will take control of their own learning. Thank you, Lucy, for giving me that.
Thank you, John. I would just add to that, in 2013, 50% of the mobiles that were bought or acquired were not smartphones. So I think in all that thought, the cut across here for me is that what we've got to do is keep thinking about the ways that we can use the text and voice facilities of standard mobile phones to support learning. And I think there's a whole set of things we can do more in that context.
Was it Microsoft just within the last day or two announced a $15 phone? And someone soon will announce a $15 smartphone, I'm sure.
Well, and I mean, Mozilla have got a $33 smartphone that is amazing. So I think this device issue isn't an issue anymore. The issue is the connectivity and making sure that exists.
Absolutely. With that, Lucy, before anybody else interrupts.
Great comments from John. I would add to that I would be a little concerned about what the potential impact is on indigenous cultures and mobile phones. Like, are all the changes that are coming going to be positive? I mean, I think we need to be a little bit wary of that. So that said, the kinds of things that have been popping out to me are during this conversation are not necessarily new. I feel like I'm going to repeat myself saying the same things I've said in every debate. But at least here in the United States, there are, I would say that the teachers are very beleaguered, a lot of expectations on them right now. And in order, again, we cannot say this enough, in order to have teachers leverage mobiles effectively, there has to be more support and there has to be more focus on the teaching and learning simply. I'd rather have our energies focused on helping teachers develop more inquiry methods in their classrooms as opposed to actually using the devices. I think that's where we need to go, is improving that. I also don't know, we haven't talked about colleges of education, around the world. Where is that? Where are we going with them and mobile learning? I would really be interested in hearing more from that community about what they're trying to do to help teachers prepare. So that's about it. I mean, I think that we, I think the leadership piece needs to be developed, particularly in the United States, because leaders seem to be having more managerial kinds of roles as opposed to instructional roles. And if we want them to be instructional leaders, they need to get this and they need to believe in their teachers. And that fundamentally goes to your beliefs about teachers. Do you see teachers as deficient or capable of learning and embracing new things? So there's a lot here that we've talked about that I don't think is necessarily new. But how does this happen at the school level? That's what I'm really interested in hearing. Like, how do we get there and how do we make this happen?
Okay, so thank you very much, Lucy. I think, but I think it's true. An awful lot. A lot of the discussions come there. I'm going to come back to you, David. I just want a comment from Jim. A technical interruption here.
I'm very sorry, but some of these systems pick up typing when people have got a computer on, and we ask people to tweet. But if you tweet when in the same room as somebody else is talking, it magnifies the volume of the typing. So some people are not able to hear because of that. We aren't doing it here in this room, so it must be somewhere else. And and I think it's an interesting thing. There is a link between that very trivial point and using technology day to day. And somebody, I think, I can't remember who it was, but somebody made the point before about technology is changing so often. It's hard to get the culture right because as soon as you get used to one thing, you've got to get used to something else. And that isn't about a skill. It's a cultural thing, and how to behave on a call like this is a new type of culture, and that's what we're developing. So,
absolutely.
So I couldn't keep that underneath 2 minutes. Sorry, Gavin.
Thank you, Jim.
Was
that's real?
Was that real?
Real. Yeah.
I thought it was. Go ahead, real.
Okay. Thanks a lot. And I think, to pick up on a number of the points and Jim's point, to me, the most striking thing about mobile, and to stick to the mobile question, is that it provides an opportunity to reverse something that occurred in the 19th century, which is that we took learners away from the task and put them in a place where they could think about the task in the abstract, in a textbook, on a blackboard, presented by a teacher. And now mobile lets us bring the learning to the task and to allow the learning to be driven by the task. There's an immense difference in telling somebody how to use a map and giving them a map in their hand when they want to find their friends in the corner of some place, wherever they happen to be. They learn very differently. They ask different questions, and they retain, as we know from the cognitive science, very differently. And it seems to me that the primary question is to what extent we are going to enable the shift in power from the classroom, from the test, from the preparatory perspective, that learning is about preparing people for X, Y, Z, whatever it happens to be, and saying, not at all. The learner's voice is at any age, in any place, and that learner's voice wants to know when they need to know, and that's the task. And so when we talk about empowering women, what are they going to be doing? Is it learning for a test? Or is it dealing with something related to their health in their community or the health of their child, something that's very specific to their actual needs at that moment? And then how do we consolidate the fact that we can bring networks, collaboration, and knowledge to bear directly on a task into something that people then incorporate into the structure of their accumulated knowledge? And that means really shifting the emphasis to create a better balance between, have you passed the test, have you been to school, have you achieved the preparatory agenda that has been spelled out for you for industrial society, or are you acquiring, in a way that we know from the anthropology of many traditional societies, are you attaining the experiential acquisition, the learning by doing in real time, rather than, oh, I know all these things in advance, so if that happens to me, I'll be ready. That's not what it's about. Mobile allows us to reverse that and create a much better balance. And it seems to me a balance which really addresses much more effectively the way humans actually learn.
to Lucy's earlier point, and building on that, Riel, I think what this, or the argument, just it reflects discussions we've been having over this past week of what we're doing is going back to get to the future. And in some ways, we've been through an industrial phase which took us in a particular direction, the way in which education was organised. And sadly, because of that, it carries a certain inertia, but we sort of hang on to that. Whereas actually, some will argue that what we need is the master apprenticeship phase coming back in. It was done with the likes of Michelangelo and people like that, but where people worked and learned from working under somebody, but doing real things and creating value as they're doing it, building real things. And that was a more authentic and different way of learning. And playing to Angela's point earlier, I don't think it's all about, we're going to shift all the way back there. But it's about retaining the value of where we've been and moving forward to the newest place or to a new balance. I'd like to call in Michael Flood from Atlanta, who's been sitting very quietly. But hello. I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about two things, actually. And the most recent comments there about the shift in how students adjust to the changing environment of technology. In the early 1990s, Georgia Tech instituted two new courses, one that was part of the core curriculum for all students, which was called Introduction to Computing. And they purposefully didn't teach you how to do anything specific. What they taught you was how to figure out how to do things with whatever you were presented with. So it focused on how to ask questions and discover what the tool in front of you was capable of, and then apply what you were learning in real time, rather than teaching you how a specific program worked. Likewise, even in the computer science curriculum, they created a course on programming that intentionally did not use any real programming language. It used a contrived language to teach the concepts. I don't believe that we today are teaching enough to students in the school systems about the concepts associated with existing in a more digital and collaborative information-based society. Instead, we focus on teaching them how to use a particular piece of technology or how to use a particular program or application to receive content or instruction. I think we could do much more to go back to that point about learning in the moment, to teach them about how, when presented with a problem in the real world or in the educational environment, they can use the tools that are at their fingertips, including, obviously mobile technology, to go out, learn, discover, collaborate, and solve that problem in the moment. I think teaching students to be learners, to be active learners anytime and anywhere, is something we need to actively engage.
Gavin, thank you. Just two quick points, Gavin, on this, which is that it implies, if we take this thread, it implies something about, knowing who you're dealing with. In other words, we've got an identity problem that we're not investing in. Who is giving you advice when you access and when you ask? And the other thing, which is really major, is accumulation of what you know. How do we signal that I've learned something because I've done it? And in the current context, it's zero. There's just no recognition of it. So what are the incentives? But the problem is we're talking about real power here and the trust that we have in existing systems, Jim. So your inertia point is that if we don't take that on and say, look, we need to start experimenting with real systems that give people credit for what they've done. And if we don't start saying, look, we need to be able to find some way to give people the right to their identity online, which says, because I've given you good advice, I have a reputation and I can defend that reputation and maintain that reputation, we won't get this kind of infrastructure happening for the real-time access and collaboration that we're talking about. We'll remain wedded to institutions which have big budgets and people with status and labels next to their name.
No, it's interesting. I think there's a whole series of things there, and I don't want to take us down the route of badges, so I won't mention them. With that, can we go to Adrian Godfrey?
Yeah, thanks. Drop me in it again. I was just going to just mention that you asked about SIM connections. Sorry, going back a few conversations ago, and as a measurement of connectivity of people across the planet. So the GSMA figures state that in 2013, there were 6.9 personal SIM cards in existence. So this doesn't include machine-to-machine or any advent of the IoT, which is where the 30% increase is coming from. We think there's a compound annual growth rate of about 4.2% from 2013 to 2020, which would provide an estimate of 9.2 billion SIMs in existence. Now, that's not the real story, and we understand that. So we looked into unique subscribers, and we think in 2013 there were 3 billion unique subscribers, which is approximately 47% of the population on the planet. So half of the population does not have a SIM card, which is a bit disturbing. And we think the growth rate the compound annual growth rate over the next 7 years to 2020 will be only 3.5%. So it's not a massively encouraging statistic. So we're clearly getting into the parts of the world that are very difficult to cover with mobile. However, some of the more encouraging statistics are around data acquisition and the growth of data 4G connections, LTE connections, which have doubled over the last 4 years. 256 networks globally 4 years ago. In 2013, more than 500 by 2017. And the people using broadband, there was a comment about dumb phones and smartphones. The compound annual growth rate on broadband acquisition is 15%. So we think there's a churn in the handset market leading towards smartphones as opposed to feature phones. And those facts are available on our GSMA website under our intelligence unit.
Actually, I just picking up on that point, Adrian, I'm fascinated by these figures, and what I picked out was, and I'm not sure where I got this, but well, actually I do, but the active mobile broadband figures are of the order of 2.315 million, and the fixed broadband subscriptions are 700 million. So when you think about that the mobile has moved us forward extraordinarily, if these figures are anywhere near correct.
Yeah, 2013, 2.2 billion, not million.
Yeah.
That was the mobile, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and that was the encouraging piece. I think John and others mentioned the leapfrog effect, especially in areas with lacking connectivity and power and everything else, that the mobile broadband networks are rolling out with significant amounts of data available to those with smartphones.
I remember you telling me, Adrian, about the impact of mobile access on farmers in India a few years ago on a project that you worked on when you were at Cisco. And I think one of the things I won't put words in your mouth, but I will, about one access point shared between a community can actually make a difference. So when you said before only 47% have them, maybe that's okay for now.
Maybe that's enough.
So just a sort of a comment on that.
And it's the same idea of if a teacher has a computer or an iPad or a tablet or whatever it is, then that is perhaps the multiplication effect you get by their sharing that.
Yes,
is good if the pedagogies are right.
And what's coming through on the tweets and other places is people are starting to ask, "This is really interesting, but can we have more examples of success?" And
yeah,
that's one
absolutely. Let me come back to that, because I think the word we're missing here is appropriate. And you're absolutely right. We can talk about numbers and technology and bandwidth and everything else, but are we providing solutions that are appropriate? And many times that's indicated by there's a commercial solution. So people provide it, people pay for it, somebody makes profit, they continue to provide it and improve it, which is sort of the angle we're coming from. But Estelle in South Africa made a really nice point about what really is appropriate in this sense. And I can say, and hopefully Jennifer will bail me out with a few names, but there's a service in Kenya that helps children pass their high school exam, which enables them to get to high school.
Yeah. Not
to achieve in high school, just to get into high school. And it's delivered over SMS. And it's extraordinarily affordable, and it's really successful. And Estelle, I know in South Africa, matric is really, really important for you. So if there was something that helped you get through matric or helped your colleagues, wherever they're from, whether they're from townships or whether they're from the burgeoning middle class, that's got to be a good thing. And it's an appropriate solution, it's an appropriate technology, and it's at a point that's affordable and, of course, sustainable as a commercial offering. And so those are some of the examples that are coming out, and they're not big transformational projects yet. but they're very appropriate.
I think that's really useful. And if we're wanting more, Yvette, you've been very quiet and hiding in the background somewhere, I think. I wonder if you want to say anything about projects which are using mobile.
From a British Council perspective, it's, we're very proud of the work that the Badiliko project. This has been very successful in Kenya. But I think also I wanted to just comment on what Adrian was just saying about learning, because one of the things that I think has been interesting in the debate that we haven't talked about very much is about learning as something that can have an impact on a community. So, for instance, if we're talking about digital access, what does that mean? Not just for the learner in the classroom, but for that community and what a learner can do for their community as a result of that, which is partly, again, what for instance, the Badiliko project has been a good example of. Over to you, Gavin.
Thank you, Yvette. I also want to draw on Michael Furdyk, because we've not heard from you, Michael. I know we've heard from Jennifer, but time you contributed. And maybe with an example.
Sure. Well, one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about is how we can leverage the fact that people have their devices with them outside of formal learning environments to actually learn more about how we can influence their behavior and actions and kind of just-in-time learning based on where they are. So one of the experiments on that front has been an app, a mobile-friendly website, an app called Commit to Act, which is really looking at environmental sustainability and stewardship and helping students identify wherever they are, whether it's in a classroom context, at home, different actions and activities they can take to reduce their footprint on the environment, and then associated learning related to that action. So they can learn more about and extend, whether it's looking at water use, energy, transportation, especially food. And so looking at how we embed environmental learning using mobile devices and really into any subject and grade level. In the coming months, the New York City's mayor's office runs a program called Global Partners Junior, and we're going to be having middle school students in 22 different cities around the world using this app and collaborating to really kind of compete to reduce their impact on the environment as they're learning about this living cities model of environmental stewardship and sustainability across developing and developed regions of the world. So we're really also from a research perspective interested in how mobile learning can drive behavior change outside of just the learning theme, but in personal behavior and action around sustainability.
That's really interesting because I think it does go much further. I'd like to just check in with David Atchoarena and also with Miguel afterwards, just to again to catch up with your comments as you started us off and set us off in this direction, I suppose. So, David, your comments, please.
Maybe a comment on one of the challenges that I pointed out in my presentation, which is about literacy. I think that we've discussed, I think, a lot about mobile learning in the classroom and how it can also improve learning, change the classroom culture. But I think we should not also, overlook the potential of transforming also the way adults learn, both in, I would say, illiterate environments and how it can change that, but also towards moving to a lifelong learning society or lifelong learning cities, as we just heard from our colleagues in Toronto. So there is clearly, I think, massive opportunities which are being put forward with a fast development of connectivity and mobile technologies for really improving, but also changing the way adults learn, and in giving a potential for accessing knowledge, but also from getting support through different ways, with different types of peer-to-peer coaching systems. So really, I think that we also have to monitor and follow closely, what is happening in this area, because we may actually contribute to, but also observe major changes in the field of adult education.
Thank you, David. And I absolutely support that. And I think there's an awful lot that's in releasing us from the constraints of the education systems as they have been to allow us to move forward into a new position which really takes advantage of the new situations that we're in. and indeed the new challenges that we face. Miguel, would you like to comment?
Yes, I like very much that there has been a lot of discussion about the learning outcomes. And I would like to go a little more in detail here. The learning outcome has two dimensions. First is the purpose, the aim. And I like the example of Georgia Tech about active engagement. And when we hear, for example, that Georgia Tech is changing the way they teach and approach technology to their students, I ask myself, why is something like this not happening at the school level? Is what we are teaching really relevant for our students? Should we continue teaching, I'm just asking, polynomia or whatever other stuff? Georgia Tech asked itself and changed the way they teach. I definitely believe that we have to revise the curriculum. I think we haven't looked really deeply to the curriculum since the end of World War II, where science began to be extremely important. But the world has changed, education has not changed, but the needs have changed. So for me, it's time to revise the curriculum. And the second aspect regarding the learning outcome are the means. The first thing is teachers. Definitely, teachers is the most important one. And when we address teachers, I ask myself what's happening in the professional training. That means schools of education. Now, the schools of education are coming students which already have digital abilities. However, the professionals that come out of these schools have not changed for 30 years. So they come with digital abilities, but they don't come out making use of these digital abilities. So once again, I ask myself, we should really revise what's happening in the schools of education. And for me, that's also related to the curriculum, because the schools of education are focusing for the 60-year-old curriculum and are not looking for what we really need. And the third aspect is there have been a lot of very nice examples of usage of technology. And I would like to put a yellow light, because for me, this is anecdotic learning. And let me exemplify what I mean about anecdotic learning. I was sitting in a classroom, a whole classroom of math, 5th grade, observing the teacher, what he was doing. And the class was 70 minutes long, if I'm not wrong. And around the minute, like 15 or 20, somebody came, named 5 or 6 children, and asked the children to go to the lab, because the ministry gave the schools labs and software, so the kids have to train themselves in the labs. So the kids left after 20 minutes the classroom and didn't come back, so they lost the lecture. And afterwards, I asked them what did they train in the lab. And what they did in the lab was completely not related to what the teacher was doing at that moment, and even more, not related to what the teacher was doing the last 2-3 months or going to do in the next 2-3 months. So for me, this is completely anecdotic. We're losing the time with the technology. And of course, the more they use the technology, the worse it will be, because the kids are losing time in the classroom, and what they're training in the lab is unrelated to what they really need. So we have to take care what we really do with technology is related to what the teachers needs really are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel, and all excellent points and all rich information which we can, I hope, reflect on as we go forward. But I'd like now to turn to Bob in Manchester. I think you have been waiting to say something for a little while. Sorry, Bob.
Well, yeah, no, thank you, Gavin. I will do. I thought I'd just share a light-hearted anecdote with you all about mobiles and education and some of the culture issues. But before I want to do that, I just want to say I agreed a lot with what Ryle said, which was I think we've got to tackle the assessment system first. The assessment system is the tail that wags the pedagogical dog. And until we get our assessment system and the QCA and all the frameworks about assessment. Until we get that sorted, that's going to be a challenge. I also like to agree with what Miguel's just said. Teacher training is absolutely critical. And of course, now in our country, in England, a lot of teacher training is going on in schools rather than in education departments of universities and so on. And finally, just a point before I share the anecdote that Michael Flood said, which I agree with, is about teaching, about the concepts behind. One of the things for the last 2 years I've been heavily involved in is the reform of the national curriculum of ICT in schools here, where from this year the new national curriculum is called computing, and children are going to learn computational thinking. They're going to learn how to program themselves and coding and lots of other things rather than just the utilisation. But anyway, the anecdote quickly, and it's about old mobiles. My son, who's in school up here in Manchester, we had to go in to see the head teacher about something. I can't remember what it was. And because I'm involved in this work, I always took the opportunity to ask, how's your mobile policy going? And the head teacher said, it's going fantastically well. And I said, well, how do you know? And he said, because we've confiscated 220 mobiles already. Now, that in itself was funny enough, but I dug a bit deeper. And I said, well, where are all these? And he said, oh, they're all in a box in the secretary's office. So we went into the secretary and I looked. And of course, what I discovered was a box full of really, really old Nokia and other phones. And when I asked the secretary, the secretary said, and I don't understand why this works, because, these get confiscated off children in the morning and then they never bother to come back. So I asked Kieran when he got home, I said, what's going on in your school about mobiles? And of course, the trick that the children had learned was to carry 2 mobile devices in their pockets, ones that they want to use, which was the smartphones, and then the granddad's old Nokia phone. So when it was confiscated and the teacher says, give me your mobile, they give them the old Nokia phone, which ended up in a box in the secretary's office and we never got collected. So our children, we have to credit our children with, real emotional intelligence and to find the ways around the culture to make use of the mobile.
I'm just very worried about all the granddads.
I think we've lost my phone.
No, that's excellent. Thank you. John Connell, I know, has been trying to get in for a while.
I'd love to come in at some stage.
Yeah. Was that Michael? Oh, yep. And David and was that Keith?
It was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Keith, go ahead, and then we'll go to John Connell.
Yeah.
I was just going to respond. I think this rethinking policies, at least in the United States, since 2000, we had what are called acceptable use policies, and what those typically did in most school districts was to ban technologies. And we've seen a huge change in the United States of school districts rethinking their acceptable use and going to responsible use policies, which rather than banning the technology, flips it and says, let's focus on the behavior. And if you're using it inappropriately, then you lose privileges. But we don't start by banning the technology. Also, for Miguel, who is looking for examples, I just want to mention that we've at least tried to document some leading edge school districts that are using mobile devices for learning in North America. And I know we're not supposed to be promoting our websites, but there are video case studies of 4 districts in Georgia, North Carolina, Colorado, and there's another state too. So if those are helpful for folks that are looking for evidence and at least some of the best practices, we've actually broken it down into like 2-minute kind of snippets, answering what they found were big mistakes they'd made or successes they'd had. So I hope that's helpful.
I'm sure it is, and I'm sure we should be sharing more of these things and our access to them so that we can all help each other and not to keep on making the same mistakes. John Connell.
I just want to make one very quick and very simple point. It comes from the document that David showed us earlier on, the mobile learning policy guidelines, which he managed to hand to you in London. And that's this question about assessment, reassessing assessment. Bob mentioned it as well. And one of the nice things that comes out of that report is this whole idea that the mobile network, using the mobile device and so on, can actually, one thing it certainly can do is to give immediate feedback. And that if you're able to do that, then you can actually start to rethink what assessment is, how it can be done, what it can actually mean for day-to-day teaching and learning. Just that simple point, Gavin. That was all.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that. And John Galloway, I think you had another point.
In a sense, I'm sort of opening up another thread and contributing to the positive stories, is that mobile and handheld technologies, and particularly tablets, have had a particularly positive impact in the area of special educational needs and inclusion. That we, with these devices, we've seen a convergence of technologies. What was once very specialist, like touchscreens and speech-to-text and speech feedbacks and so on, even 10 years ago, a touchscreen was a big box, almost the size of a small fridge. But now a touchscreen is something that's in everybody's pocket. We have voice control of our devices the moment they come out of the box. The iPhone is the most popular phone amongst people who are blind. Now, that's counterintuitive. You'd think that blind people would need a tactile phone, but it's actually because it is so responsive and it works with speech commands as soon as it comes out of the box. And it's a technology that can literally change lives. It can give people without a voice, and in something that is quite light, portable, powerful, casual, desirable. And it's a shift from only 3 or 4 years ago, where a communication aid was quite a large box that did one thing. It spoke for you. Now we've got something that does many things for us. So we carry around our music, our lives. We can connect and communicate with people. And one of the things, one of the areas that it has significantly changed is young people's involvement in the curriculum. It's a technology that you can take to them. If you've got young, children with quite profound disabilities, it can be difficult to get them to the technology, like the interactive whiteboard or the touchscreen. But it's almost, you can more or less position one of these things anywhere that the young person can reach. So, they really have been a game changer in the sense of making accessible access itself and communication and enabling achievement. And, even for people with perhaps less severe learning difficulties like dyslexia, it gives you other ways of recording and demonstrating your achievement. You can take a video, you can take a photo, you can add voice, you can record something, and you can connect and communicate very quickly and easily. So, before we finish, I don't think we should lose sight of one particular area where these things have been very powerful and important.
Absolutely. Absolutely wonderful. I want to just check with Marie in Portland, Oregon. Marie, would you like to make a comment? Indeed, are you there?
Maybe not. We didn't manage to check at the beginning.
No, we didn't check at the beginning. So
I think Angela wants to make a comment.
I think so. We'll pass to Angela.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. Just another quick positive story. The OECD, as you know, produces some phenomenally useful and robust data about driving up improvement from school systems. And they've recently produced a report looking at the factors that can actually reverse that apparently intractable link between socioeconomic status and educational achievement. What can you really do to help kids who are just being underserved by the system? And one of the most powerful factors they've identified is if you can do something to improve the link between home and school. And that can even be something as simple as having a conversation with somebody at home about whether or not you've done anything in school, so that there is a recognition in the home environment that school matters. One of the things that we saw happening in some of the most disadvantaged schools in the UK when we ran our longitudinal project was because kids were carrying the devices home in their pockets. When they went through the door, they were having conversations with people at home, using the device to show what they've been doing. And we had a number of families who were saying, well, I used to ask what they did at school, and I just get the usual, oh, nothing response, which we've all had, but now they get their device out, they show me what they're doing. So that portability, that personalisation and portability that the device gives you of having your stuff with you in your pocket We also had kids referring back to that stuff, often much later, including some kids who were referring back to stuff they did in primary school in their first year of secondary. Now, how powerful might that be, given that we know all secondary and primary schools really struggle to get carryover during transition? So I think those are two really good positives that we can perhaps build on, that mobile really does facilitate.
I think that's absolutely right. And it's about recognising these things and thinking how to use them and how to develop their use.
Yeah.
But just as instruments of reflection, which we're all trying to encourage, just as a kind of nice match of the new and the old in a way, and making things happen. I'd like to go to David and the students with their teacher sitting quietly behind, I think, in South Africa, but from Zimbabwe, for a final couple of comments from you.
Thank you, Gavin. I wanted to make 2 points. The first was the point made earlier by both Keith and David, Keith from Washington and David in Paris, about the importance to put pedagogy in front of technology. I just think that is a critical aspect of this debate, not just in Zimbabwe, but I think throughout the world. It's so important for teachers to be given the skills, not necessarily ahead of the technology, but certainly abreast of it. But the second point, I see we've got very limited time, is an entirely new point that possibly will be the subject of a completely new debate, and that's the issue of e-books. To give you some context, when I took over as Minister of Education in Zimbabwe, children, on average, 15 kids had to share one textbook. And our ability to address that was enormous. And African countries have the ability to leapfrog if they can get access to e-books. And e-books are readily accessible through mobile technology. We can give schools in rural areas whole libraries. But, of course, there are certain constraints. We don't have time to debate them today, but I'm just sowing a seed for the future. There's copyright and issues like that that stand in the way of e-books being used in conjunction with mobile technology. But let me just draw in Terence and Estelle very quickly to see if they've got points that they want to make quickly.
So quickly commenting on a tweet by Lucy Gray, where it said a lot of teachers are a little skeptical about reading on mobile devices. And I think that also reminded me of another point whereby the teachers are feeling threatened to a certain extent by mlearning. And I was thinking that if we could get to a stage whereby we show the teachers how mlearning can actually enrich their jobs, and it's an aid to education and not to aid to teaching and not a replacement for teaching. And I think that would actually be very beneficial, especially in countries like Zimbabwe, where the unemployment rate stands at about 90%, and they're really afraid of such a thing that might replace their jobs. And that's what I thought was important.
Yes, and I've just been thinking that app designers and the content creators almost for these education things should really come on board with mobile education and mobile learning moving forward. We need to update them and hear from them and make sure that they are around in all the areas so that applicable to the context, content can be made.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for those comments, those final comments. I would like to just, for a final time, go to David and to Miguel, just for a 1 minute comment. So a final comment, and then we're right at the end. So David first, please.
Just to maybe emphasize the importance of the last point that has just been made by David about ebooks, about content. I mean, this is really essential, and it links to another area of work in which UNESCO is very much involved, which is about the OER, open education resources, which constitute a very important parameter to also ensure that there is adequate availability of content, but not only content, but relevant content and content available in different languages. So as we move forward, I think that in particular, when considering the potential for developing countries, we need to take, hand in hand, the issue of mobile technologies together with the issue of content, and in particular of open content.
Thank you, David. I think I see ebooks coming up on the rails as the next subject matter for discussion, or one of the next ones. Miguel, a final comment, please.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, John Galloway mentioned that technology has changed our lives. However, we all know that technology has not changed education. And a couple of people have mentioned that the reason why this hasn't really changed is because assessment. Assessment is the way we all follow. Assessment defines everything. I think that we shouldn't really care so much about assessment, because what assessment does, it controls what the system wants about the curriculum. So assessment is just the front side of the curriculum. So I would say, and that's my last word, is if you really want to make a change, don't care about assessment, care about the curriculum. I do believe that we have to rethink the curriculum.
Thank you, Miguel. I think that's clear, and I think that's a discussion that can continue. Right, we're right at the end, and I'm going to hand over to Jim in just a moment to say some final words. What I'd like to do, though, before doing that, is to say thank you to David Atchoarena and to Miguel Nussbaum for their excellent presentations, which started this conversation. Thank you to everybody in the TP units who have directly contributed to the rich set of statements and questions and observations that have been made. Thank you to the people who have listened in through WebEx or through the video stream, and for all the tweets that you've contributed along the way. And thanks to those, and Susan Inman particularly, who has been working through with the students, but working through Skype also to be connected. You all make the conversation work. It's been great to hear all comments, and I look forward to speaking with you all next time. But with that, over to Jim.
Thanks, Gavin. When we first started to think about education fast forward, we wanted it to be the antidote to attending conferences and listening to people on the stage talking, and enabling something more to happen than just listening. And today already that we've stimulated an awful lot of interest on Twitter. We've had 2 or 3 different groups of people. We're one on telepresence, but Jim Buchan has been leading a team on WebEx, as well as others. So we're moving that ripple out. What we're adding to this debate is that we're working with UNESCO. UNESCO have the Worcester's Knowledge Communities project following directly on from this. If you go to EFF11.org, you'll get the link to the UNESCO debate, because we don't want this debate to stop today. There's no point in having an EFF. Let's just be really straight, unless we can get the debate going on. And also on the EFF11.org site, you'll see that there will be a follow-up webinar on October the 14th, where people might think and come back with further comments. We also want to announce some work that we've been doing with TIG in Toronto around the Sprout Innovation Fund, where people can apply for funds that are limited, so don't get carried away, but we want to stimulate action as a result of this debate. And also, this is just one event, but it's a series. The next debate will be at the Education World Forum in January, EFF12, and you'll find details of that soon, again, on the EFF11.org website, where you can also sign up for our newsletter. I was meant to give a summary of what's going on today. I think that's actually impossible, but I think there's a real tension coming out, and Miguel brought us back to there, about learning outcomes, the connection with the curriculum, and its impact on assessment. And my reading, this might be a personal point, is the politicians won't allow us to change stuff unless we actually make learning better in current learning outcomes. To pick up Kathy's tweet, what do we mean by improved learning outcomes? Well, they've got to be learning outcomes that the politicians actually will recognise, but we'll need to get there using different behaviours and different modalities of learning. But it really will vary according to location, local needs, local cultures, all these access issues and the realities of what it's actually like on the ground. You can't escape the teacher in this process. Everybody talked about the teacher, but we need to think about the teacher and where they are on their own learning journey towards this. And if they're being paid to actually get students to achieve certain learning objectives, learning outcomes that are still coming down from the top, we can't expect them to change that quickly because that's who's paying them. So we really need to find these good examples. Someone was tweeting before that there are lots of examples on from inclusion and special needs. So if you do one more thing after this, please go to the website, tell us about good examples, and please sign up to the WSIS debate. Last few seconds, can I just say thank you to Mary, Joanne, Dorota, and Bonnie, people behind the scenes make this happen. It's been enormous, the amount of work they've done. And there on the screen, a good number of organisations that have been telling everybody out there that this debate is happening, and we hope that this debate will roll on and on. Thank you very much for attending. Safe journeys home wherever you are. We look forward to seeing you on the next debate and on the WSIS debate itself. Thank you very much.